friends are dead. All my friends are dead. Can't kick me in the head. All my friends are dead.
People have become careless and greedy. They no longer wish to get married, and when they do marry, they don't want to raise the children born to them. No, this was not written yesterday, but by the Greek historian Polybius, born around 200 BC, in his work The Histories. Birth determines much of one's future and outlooks. It is true here and now, and was even more decisive in ancient Greece, in societies with limited opportunities for upward mobility. A goddess, Ilithyia, was associated with childbirth. All evidence points to her being quite ancient, with roots predating Greek itself, making her possibly Minoan. Sometimes she is even several deities, assisting women, and even goddesses themselves, who are going into labour. Although you might not have heard much about her from mythology, there were many sanctuaries dedicated to her across ancient Greece, and all seems to indicate she was the object of prayers and offerings for the protection of pregnant women and young children. She is also associated with a mystery cult in Eleusis, which we will talk about in another video. Gods are recognizable thanks to their attributes and epithets. And when it comes to Ilithyia, she was called Mogos Tokos, literally of the pains, Mogos, of labour, Tokos, an epithet she shared with a more famous goddess you probably do know, Fair Artemis, goddess of the hunt and protectress of young women. Giving birth was of course difficult, and childbirth was, as always, a hazard. Some babies were stillborn and some died quite young. But even if the child did live, it wasn't the end of the road for the lucky newborn. Once born and proven to be durably alive, the child could still meet a terrible fate. Let us compare Greece and Rome, where fathers had the patria potestas, which sometimes could mean the power to choose between the life or death of his wife and children in some legal situations. In Greece, women had a kurios, a male authority figure who could be a father, a guardian, a husband, or the woman's recognized partner. Both in Rome and in Greece, children who were not accepted by their father could be given up for exposure. Exposure was a practice in which infants were abandoned, either on the street or in the wild. In Rome, a column of the Auditorium came to be known as the Columna Lactaria, the milk column, where infants were brought in the hopes that they might be taken in by a compassionate family. In Greece, the head of the household, called oikos, had the authority to deny the newborn food and care. Why? It could be that the infant was exposed because he had some manner of physical defect. In Sparta, some magistrates had special authority to determine a child unfit and expose him. It could be that the child was illegitimate, born from adultery or out of wedlock. If so, the fate of the child was sealed before it was even born. The third situation depends on the head of the household's decision, and it comes down to how many children the family can afford to raise. If the child is a boy, then it means dividing up his father's inheritance. A male child also has to be taught a trade. For a girl, dowry is to be considered, and being a girl was no small factor in infant exposure. A French historian, Pierre Brulé, examined the census of 3,000 Greek immigrants into the city-state of Miletus. He observed that among them, 3 out of 4 children who had not yet gone through puberty were boys, which meant that girls were being disproportionately abandoned by their families. Heroes and heroines of Greek mythology were themselves victims of infant exposure, like Oedipus, who was abandoned because of a prophecy foreseeing that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Paris, exposed because of a similar oracle predicting he would bring about the downfall of Troy, and Atalanta, one of the Argonauts, rejected by her royal father because she was not a boy. In Greek literature, these foundlings are usually saved by divine intervention. The actual infants were often less fortunate, left in baskets or pots. The luckiest among them might have been adopted, while many were raised and sold into slavery or trafficked as prostitutes. Some perished from hunger or from drowning. Some might have been taken away by stray dogs. This practice, though it was not proudly advertised, was widespread across the ancient world. It sheds light on the methods people resorted to in order to preserve their resources and wealth and provide their children with the best possible odds of getting a good inheritance. They were part of the strategies people used to rule their households, their economy.